Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Mismor David, Adonai roi lo echzar. Binoteh yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yanahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yanecheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki helech begetz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umishantecha hema yanachamuni. Tarach lefanai sholechan neged sorrai dishantav Hashem en roshi kosi revaya ach tov chesed yirdefuni koyemechayai v'shavti beveit Adonai leorech yamim.
Twenty-third Psalm, chanted so beautifully by our Chazan, Elise Pomeranz Boro, in English, the Psalm of David. Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me to lie down in green pastures. God leads me beside the still waters and restores my soul. God guides me in straight paths for God's name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. I want to welcome everyone today and thank you for being present. Rabbi David Englander of Congregation Bethel. And Psalm 23 is an appropriate framing for what we have joined together to try to do today, because the theme of Psalm 23 is how we're not alone in dark times, and the support that can be provided to those entering into a period of mourning today, following the loss of an irreplaceably important person in their lives, is something that can make all the difference in terms of people feeling alone on the one hand or supported on the other. And the second theme that we focus on today is that of kavod, of honor. We're honoring the life of Stanley Finkelstein and we're telling some of the stories of his life so that his legacy can be passed down to future generations in ways that are memorable, as so many aspects of Stanley's life and personality are indeed memorable. And second, to honor all of you, especially this front rows, those who are entering into the valley of the shadow of death that Psalm 23 refers to. Honoring you, honoring the place that you've arrived to in your life, honoring your loss, and honoring the opportunity and obligation to be of any support that the rest of the community, family and friends alike, can be at this moment following loss. So I want to read one more psalm that from the psalmist's description tells us what it means to live a good life, meaningful life, an accomplished life. And in hearing the psalmist's description, you will be reminded of some aspects of Stan's life as well. Funeral service is meant to also inspire us to memories that can be internalized and also memories that can be shared. Mizmor LeDavid, Ami agor ba'alecha, mi yishkon b'har kadshecha, holech tamim u'fo'ad tzedek v'dover emet b'yovavo l'raga l'shono, lo'asa l'rei ra'av v'cherpa lo nasa krovo, nivzeh be'inav nimas v'et yirei Adonecha be nishba laharav li'amir kaspo natan meneshech v'shochad an akilo lakach, ose ele lo yimot le'olam. A Psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity? Do what is right? Speak the truth without deceit? Have no slander upon your tongue. Do no evil to others. Do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Practice all of your business fairly. Accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own. Then shall you stand firm forever. Alan and Deb and Rhonda are all going to speak this morning, and Alan's going to be our first speaker.
Somehow I envision that somewhere in heaven right now there is a desk that's been set up for a newly arrived engineer. It has his nameplate right there on the desk. And it would be my wish that there would be a second nameplate where he could have another title. And I tried to think what that title would be, and I couldn't come up with one word. I came up with many. And so these were my thoughts. First, husband. Dad was married for approximately 60 years. He was a widower 3 times to wives of blessed memory, Jeanette, Jane, and Jean. Devoted father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. Dad has 5 children, 5 grandchildren, a grandson-in-law, and a great-grandson. In 1956, while serving in the U.S. Navy, he was faced with the choice of going out to sea on an aircraft carrier or being present at the birth of his daughter. He chose the latter and asked for an honorable discharge from the Navy. Engineer. Dad was employed for 14 years at 2 aerospace firms, Chrysler and LTV Aerospace. Following his layoff from LTV, he was hired as an automotive engineer by Ford Motor Company, where he spent the last 29 years of his career, retiring in 2000. He consulted briefly thereafter for Michigan's Department of Transportation. As an aerospace engineer, Dad worked on the team that designed the space capsule for Project Mercury. He reviewed test results of the land's battlefield missile for the U.S. Army, and he had an opportunity to review classified aerial photographs of ballistic missiles during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Handyman. Dad built numerous things with his power tools, including a finished basement in our house in Livonia, Michigan, stereo cabinets, and stencils for a beautiful Jewish star made of multicolored stones which adorned the entrance of the Livonia Jewish Congregation's building. When I became a homeowner, Dad helped me replace rotted fascia boards on the second floor of my house and fixed a sump pump in my basement that wasn't working properly. Dad knew how to do simple plumbing issues, including replacing loose shower tiles. He often painted interior and exterior walls. He built a workbench for me in the basement of our Southfield home and a cage for Peter, our pet rabbit. Dad assembled the swing set and roller coaster in our backyard of our Livonia home. Landscaper. Dad planted numerous trees and shrubs at our houses in Livonia and Southfield. He built a planter box with railroad ties for our Southfield home, and he erected a fence in the backyard. Outdoorsman. Dad went on fishing trips with friends. He took me fishing on several occasions at lakes in the Detroit area. One of my earliest recollections of Dad was casting his fishing line from a pier at Destin Beach, Florida. As a kid, Dad went to Camp Tamarack in Brighton, Michigan, and when I turned 9 years old, he started sending me and my siblings to overnight camps. Sportsman. Dad was a varsity baseball player at Cass Tech High School and Wayne University in Detroit. He was a member of junior varsity basketball and track and field. He played on numerous championship teams in softball leagues. His college fraternity, Gamma Kappa Chi, won a sports championship over all the fraternities at Wayne University in the early 1950s. As a bowler, Dad averaged over 180 in B'nai B'rith Brotherhood Jacobson League. He once bowled a 298 or 299, missing a strike on his last shot. Scholar. In addition to earning a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from Wayne University, Dad also earned a master's degree in industrial psychology from the University of Detroit. When I was very young, Dad continued his education by taking classes in night school. Traveler. Dad and Mom frequently traveled to countries such as England, Czechoslovakia, Israel, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. Dad went to Germany on business trips on numerous occasions. In 1986, he took his children to a timeshare in the Bahamas. Later in 2007, he organized a tour of Israel for his children and grandchildren. Dad and Mom also stayed at a timeshare in Traverse City, Michigan. Leader. Dad rose to the rank of vice president at Ford Motor Company. He served as president of the Livonia Jewish Congregation and Temple Emmanuel. Later, he served as president of Michigan's Jewish Genealogical Society. Artist. Dad took numerous painting classes. We have some of Dad's paintings hanging at home, and there are many more waiting to be framed. Genealogist. Dad researched the Finkelstein family and created a family tree. He spent many hours at libraries and the Mormon Church. Dad traveled to the town of Bardiov in the Czech Republic to visit the cemetery where many of his ancestors and the Goodman family were buried. Appalled by the deplorable conditions in the cemetery, Dad petitioned several organizations and found one that financed the restoration of the cemetery. Dad peer-reviewed my PowerPoint presentation for South Jersey Men's Club, which told the story of my mother-in-law's family's escape from Nazi Germany and arrival at Ellis Island in 1940. Dad suggested I visit the National Archives in New York City and accompanied me to the Evo Institute in Lower Manhattan and allowed me to use his Ancestry.com account to download documents of my wife's family. Mechanic. Dad was able to fix family cars and knew how to install new brakes. Dad was once in charge of braking systems for light trucks and often tested them at Ford's Proving Grounds in Dearborn, Michigan. Dad installed a new engine on his lawnmower after the old one was stolen. Cook. Dad barbecued burgers, hot dogs, and chicken on the patio grill. He made pancakes for the kids on Sunday mornings and was able to make them in the shape of bunny rabbits and teddy bears. When Dad brought home his catch from fishing, he scaled and cleaned them and cooked them for dinner. Adventurer. Legend has it that when Dad was young and living in Bergen County, New Jersey, he used to walk along train tracks and climbed underneath the tracks as trains approached. Comedian. Dad made lots of jokes about the things that he saw and heard. For example, while driving me to a store when I was about 7 years old, he noticed a sign that read, "Slow children playing," to which he replied, "What's the matter? Can't they play any faster?" Dad wrote silly versions of well-known songs. Dad's best-known phrase was, "Let's went." Dad's best-known faux pas was when he drilled holes in the ground for fence poles in our backyard and accidentally severed underground telephone cables, knocking out most of the phones in our neighborhood. Impersonator. Allegedly, Dad once snuck into Jeanette's class to sit for her exam, which he passed. Bridge player. Dad was an avid contract bridge and duplicate bridge player. When he wasn't playing with his regular partner, we played together at a local duplicate bridge game. Connoisseur of fine foods. In addition to home-cooked meals on the grill or the pancake griddle, Dad loved to eat at Panera's restaurants. Animal lover. Dad owned 2 dogs, a German Shepherd named Rex and a Norwegian Elkhound named Thor. He allowed the family to own pets, which explains why we had a rabbit, chameleons, gerbils, tropical fish, and snakes. Ladies' man. When Dad was divorced and visiting family in Toronto, he wanted to flirt with a woman at the restaurant at Yorkdale Holiday Inn. He asked Alyssa not to mention the fact that he was her grandfather. When he was a resident at Lionsgate Nursing Home, he held hands with his friend TJ and kissed a nurse. Teacher. As a kid, Dad taught me how to play sports such as baseball and basketball. When I was 7 years old, he taught me how to ride a 2-wheel bicycle. As a student, Dad was always there to answer a question if I needed help with homework. As an adult, Dad taught me the virtues of hard work, honesty, and integrity. He encouraged all of us to strive for excellence in whatever we do. He supported my decision to switch majors in college from physics to actuarial science, even though he said it couldn't hurt to consider engineering. He stressed the importance of continuing my education after college because learning was a journey, not a destination. My final thoughts. Dad's many accomplishments inspired me to write my own success story. For example, my wife and I recently celebrated our 40th wedding anniversary. Dad's career and work in military service lasted 45 years. Recently, I celebrated my 46th anniversary in the actuarial profession. And like Dad, I was also promoted within my company and currently serve as an assistant vice president. Like our father, my sisters and I also earned graduate degrees from college. I earned several designations in the insurance industry, including the prestigious Fellow of the Society of Actuaries. Dad and Mom were thrilled to become grandparents. They would call us on short notice and tell us that they would be passing through the neighborhood and like to stop for a visit. When the doorbell rang, there they were bearing gifts for the grandchildren. 2 years ago, I became a grandfather, and now my daughter, Jillian, is expecting her second child. And finally, I never participated in varsity sports. However, I won several trophies for softball, volleyball, and bowling. More than 60 years after my father taught me how to ride a bicycle, I have cycled at least 50,000 miles, participated in more than 70 charity bike rides, raised more than $80,000 for various causes, and traveled 3 times to Israel to participate in charity bike rides through the Negev Desert. Dad, thanks for the memories and for the devotion and love that you gave to your family. You will be greatly missed.
Debbie, when you're ready.
That was a tough act to follow. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Stan's daughter, Deb. From my earliest memories, my father had a great love for people. His immediate and extended family, his 3 beloved wives who preceded him in death, and particularly the Jewish people. Even at the end of his days, he expressed optimism about returning to Israel. Fortunately, he had visited there several times, one of the most memorable in 2007, when he took his 5 grandchildren to tour the country with a private guide. And hey, the parents of those children had to tag along. It was one of those life events we will never forget and we are grateful for. My father served the Jewish community his entire life as a leader in his, I'm sorry, I need these glasses. That helps a little. As a leader in his religious communities, then as a helper with genealogy, then as a singer in the choir of his synagogue in Arizona. I never heard him sing in the choir, but I imagine him sounding like a combination of Tom Jones and Leonard Cohen. Just kidding. But his chanting of the Kiddush on Shabbat and at family seders is indelibly imprinted on my brain. Even though his first wife, Jeanette, passed 57 years ago, he remained close with her family, nieces and nephews to this day, his brother Nat's children as well. Many expressed the desire to join us today, and I thank you all for your enduring love across the miles. A few random memories I have of my dad. His love of pistachio nuts. In the old days, the food companies used to dye them red. I think that was a marketing ploy because no one ate them otherwise. So our hands would be stained all day after eating them. In his 30s, he still played baseball. He came home from a game one day, all bruised and battered and requiring crutches. He was pitching that day, and he ran to home plate to force a batter or a base runner out at the plate. The guy either slid into him or knocked him down trying to get the ball out of his mitt, and some kind of brawl ensued. Dad wasn't a pushover when it came to his passion for winning. Another fond memory was watching the Lions and Tigers play. We spent many hours lying on pillows on the floor in front of our family room TV. I'm sure he is how we discovered our love of sports, albeit mostly spectator for me. Rhonda and Alan were the ones who became competitive team players in their respective sports. My husband Richard was never much of a competitive athlete either, despite his father Chuck's efforts to send him to boys' baseball camp and take him to Chicago baseball and football games. Speaking of Chicago, I want to express my gratitude, even on this sad occasion, to see my brothers Gary and Eric here today. Your presence means so much to me. I thank Dad for marrying Jane so that we could all grow up and hopefully old together. There are so many memories that are not possible to share today, so I'll close with this thought, that my father led a life filled with many unfathomable losses, but also blessed with long and fruitful years surrounded by a loving and supportive family. We should all be so lucky. I love you, Dad.
Good morning. So I'm Rhonda. I was my father's baby. And I always knew that this would be very difficult for me when my father passed. Not sure if it was when I realized that he was kind of the center of my world. I don't know if it was when Jeanette, my mother, passed away. I was only 5 years old. But that seems to be when I felt the desire to be attached whenever I could be. Whether going to pick up deli at Max's Delicatessen, running errands, going to my grandma Molly's, any opportunity for alone time, I was there. Of course, we had 5 of us in the household, and so anytime I could get alone time, I was going to take it. As Debbie said, we all loved watching sports with him, hours and hours of watching baseball, football, hockey, the Olympics. I can picture him laying on his side, propped up, eating Snaps, Good and Plenty, Mary Jane candy, and I think that's probably where I got my sweet tooth, and pistachios. Not only do we watch sports together, but we often played sports together, hitting the tennis ball against the wall at Vandenberg and having to jump up on the roof to get all the balls that we hit up there, playing catch, tobogganing at Sherritt Ceddic, bowling at Hartfield Lanes, etc. Everybody knows that I've been a jock most of my life, and there's no question where I got my love for sports. I understand my mother also was an athlete, but he was the one who was there for me all through the years, encouraging that. When I ran high school track, my stepmother was very opposed to me running, and I know that he couldn't express it in the house, but I know that he enjoyed reading my results in the newspaper and coming to watch me run at the state finals. Judaism was extremely important to my dad, and he did all he could to instill Jewish values in all of his children. I remember years of sitting next to him at temple, braiding the tallis, fringes, trying to keep up with him when reading and singing in Hebrew, and listening for his harmonies at the end of the prayers, even if they weren't always on key. As time passed and I grew into my own person, my priorities obviously began to change, and my dad and I didn't always see eye to eye. He wasn't always happy with my decisions, as most parents aren't, and of course I wasn't always happy with his. So we had some tough times, but I never stopped loving him, and I knew that through those times he loved me as well. After his divorce and years of living alone in the Detroit area, I convinced him to move to California. We had many wonderful times when he was in Temecula, celebrating our holidays, watching Sean and Kevin's tennis matches, going bowling, to movies, out to eat, etc. I watched him become a very active member of our teeny tiny congregation, kibitzing with temple members and becoming known as Stan the Man, especially during bingo. At one point, he was living with us for a while when he moved out to California, and somebody mentioned, why don't you live with your daughter? So he came home and he said, hey, what do you think about me living with you? And I said, Dad, you're really young. You're going to start dating. Well, that'll be really weird if you want to bring somebody home to your daughter's house. So needless to say, he got his own apartment, and he started dating. After marrying Jean and eventually moving to Tucson, it became harder to reach him. He didn't answer his phone, and visits weren't as frequent. It was an 8-hour drive. I feel extremely fortunate during this difficult year that we just had with Jean's passing, his extended stays in the hospital and at the rehab center, and ultimately at Lionsgate, that we had the opportunity to express thoughts and emotions that had long gone unsaid. I flew to New Jersey multiple times this year, and each time I left, I wasn't sure if it was going to be the last time that I would see him. So I never missed an opportunity to tell him how I thought and how I loved him, and he did the same. Even from the house, when I went back to California, I would call him, and we would say Jewish prayers over the phone, and Mishaberachs, and etc., and continued our love of Judaism together through the phone. In July, my dad told me he was going. I visited him in the evening, and that was not a good time to visit him. When you're in a skilled nursing facility, evening is not good. But it was all we had. So I went in, and he said, I'm going. And I said, where are you going? You going to sleep? And he said, my final sleep. And I got very upset, and I said, well, if that's what you want, if that's what you're wishing for, I hope you get what you wish. But I will be here in the morning, and I will miss you, and I will always love you. So these last 2 weeks, my husband John and I have been traveling cross-country in our motorhome to come see him. And we, along the way, I would call him and say, I'm only this many days away, I'm only this many days away, this is what we're doing. And we got the news of his passing the day we were supposed to arrive in New Jersey. So we would have seen him the next morning, but we were too late. So as I had said to him in July, I am here, and if this is what you wish for, I hope that you got your wish, but I will miss you, and I will never stop loving you. Rest in peace, Pop.
Well, thank you for your beautiful reflections and memories. I heard some, but not all of those stories yesterday when I had the privileged opportunity to learn more about Stanley's life in a special conversation with our speakers and with Sherry as well, who were present. Alan, Deb, and Rhonda, Gary, and Eric have all lost their father. And our Jewish tradition instructs us in connection to how we begin to try to comfort mourners, including by being present today. And although the upcoming holiday of Sukkot prevents a full Shiva experience, by sharing your stories of Stanley over the coming days and weeks and months. Stanley was a blessing to those who knew and who loved him. The arc of his life took him to live in more places and to have to manage loss and rebuilding more often than he probably imagined he would have to as a younger man. No one expects to bury 3 wives, all of whom were lost before what anyone would have thought was their time. We can identify, name, and admire his resilience, just as we can name the most important force in his and many lives, which is love of family and a deep desire to connect with other people. As you said, Stan was a people person. He was a kibbutzer. Having spent some time in Ann Arbor, I'm familiar with the Detroit-Livonia-Southfield Triangle. And as it turns out, we both spent some time in Huntsville, Alabama. We admire, we honor service to our country, having enlisted in the Navy in the 1950s, stationed on the West Coast at the Coronado Island Naval Base. And after that, as you heard touched on, his journey is known to many: California, Tucson, Canada, for a time El Paso, Michigan, here at Lionsgate, chosen by the family in part, as you said, to feed his Jewish neshama. I also want to reiterate that Judaism was a key and core aspect of Stan's life and of his identity. It was something that he carried with him and found ways to express for his whole life. And he took this both seriously and expressed it with great joy, as you heard, as president of 2 congregations, which when you told me that, my immediate response was that some people never learn. But the truth is that it is an expression of extraordinary connection to and service also to the communities of which he was a part. I know our Chazan appreciates knowing about his experience in the choir. And he also made sure you got your Jewish education, sending you to good Hebrew schools, traveling to Israel numerous times, including that story you mentioned about finding the grave of his grandfather at Mount Scopus. I want to reiterate some aspect of Stanley's commitment to the pursuit of genealogy, as he traced his family back to at least the 1870s. I would surmise that he wanted to know where he came from, not only out of curiosity, but to fulfill the desire to know where and from whom he descended, to have a better overall picture of the life that he was blessed to lead, and to share his legacy with a family that will continue to fill in branches of this family tree with roots deep in the past. We are now approaching the end of the Torah, which ends with the death of Moses, our people's greatest leader and teacher. Well, the Torah tells us in a bit of poetic license that Moses' strength had not ebbed even at the ripe old age of 120. Other passages late in the Torah tell us that even Moses faced the pains and the pangs of old age. But he left this world knowing that he had left a legacy. Whether he knew that we would still be talking about it and that many people would be living their lives in connection to its eternally important teaching thousands of years later is not something that we can know. But Moses clearly hoped that would happen. And he addressed his message not only to those who heard his words, but to those who were, as the Torah says, not there to hear them, including us, including Stanley, who nevertheless took that call to heart. And so he leaves this world having positively impacted many people in it, and the ways that he will be remembered and how his legacy will reverberate through all of you are many, and they're varied. The story and the stories of his active and accomplished life will be told for many generations, and his memory will always be for a blessing. So I extend my condolences, those of our Chazan and the Bethel community, to Alan and Sherry, to Deborah and Richard, Rhonda and John, Gary and Wendy, and to Eric, to the grandchildren, Jillian and David, Alyssa, Sean, Kevin, and Alex, and to great-grandson Jacob, as well as to all of the rest of the family and to Stanley's friends. May Stanley's soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace, and we say, Amen. So I want to note what you probably already know, which is that Shiva will take place following interment at Alan Sherry's home on North Woodstock Drive in Cherry Hill. And once again, due to the onset of the Sukkot holiday, there'll only be one night of visitation that will begin tonight at 7 p.m. There'll be a service in the home at approximately 7:15 p.m. This time, I invite you to rise and embody your spirit for the Amaleh Memorial Prayer.
מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים את נשמת שמואל בן אהרון זב ומלכה שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים, אז תראהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים. וצרו בצרו החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום המשכבו, ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Shmuel ben Aaron Zev Umalka, Stanley Finkelstein, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful one, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And we say, Amen. I invite you to be seated for another few moments.